This evening is Steve Maloney. He is working from the CC Manual, Conflict Communicator Manual, project number 10, Inspire Your Audience. Timer, the time is 8, 9, and 10. Do we at times in life end up living lives according to the expectations of society and of others? Do we sometimes have unrealistic dreams about how things could be different? Please welcome Steve Maloney with Life is Precious. Life is Precious.
I once heard a story about a kid. This story was told, if I can remember correctly, by a guy named Dan Hawkins. And he talked about how this kid, in his early teen years, one day, while the teacher was asking all the students what they wanted to be in life, he said, contrary to what everybody else was saying, most people were saying, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a mechanic, I want to be a nurse. He said to the teacher, I want to be an entrepreneur. And the teacher said, well, that's kind of strange, but what do you actually want to be? What kind of an entrepreneur? What kind of profession do you want? And he said, I simply want to be an entrepreneur. And the teacher said, you have to be realistic, though. You have to know what you actually want to do. And the young guy stood there strongly and said, well, I've seen dream stealers before, and that's okay if you have your opinion. A few weeks later, the same thing happened at the guidance counselor room. All the students were given scheduled appointments with the guidance counselor. The guidance counselor asked the boy, what do you want to do in life? And the boy said, I want to be an entrepreneur. And the guidance counselor said, yeah, but what do you actually want to do? What profession are you going to be? He said, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And the guidance counselor said, well, you know, boy, you really have to be realistic. You have to know what you want to do. And the boy said, I've seen dream stealers before, sir. That's okay if you have that opinion. Fellow Toastmasters, I want to talk to you tonight about how life truly is precious. And that sometimes we end up living the expectations of others, or the expectations of societies, because we're told that we have to be realistic. Yet deep down inside of us, there's often a yearning, a dream, which is precious. It's what we were meant to live. Deep down inside of us, there's a yearning for freedom and self-determination. This reminds me of a movie which exemplifies this to the extreme. It was called Easy Rider, where Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper were riding their choppers through the Southwest and the Badlands, where freedom was exemplified because they were doing what they really wanted to do. I have another story too that's happened right here in Saskatoon. And it's about a guy who, for me, exemplifies his form of freedom and self-determination like nobody else I've ever seen. And he's completely unrealistic. I first came into contact with what this guy does when I was at Howie's Barber Shop on 8th Street. I was waiting my turn for Howie. Actually, it's not Howie, it's Ron. Ron is his name, because he owns now Howie's Barber Shop. And there was a picture on the wall of a sailboat. And I admired it, because I like boats. I grew up on the coast, my dad built boats. And I started to talk to Ron about it. He told me about this guy who draws sailboats. And he said, you'll see those pictures around the city. I didn't think anything of it at the time. But later on, a friend of mine who used to be a bus driver in the city of Saskatoon was telling me about this crazy guy who draws sailboats. That's what he does. And he used to give him a free ride on the bus because he got along quite well with him. Then I started to notice here and there throughout the city, in businesses, sometimes behind small businesses usually, there would be a picture that was recognizable as the sailboat. This continued. even up until the 17th of February this month, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I was driving east on 8th Street, right at Arlington. And I saw this guy holding up a picture of a sailboat. He had a sailor's cap on and what looked like navy dungarees. And I was driving, and I passed him. And I said, no, I can't pass this guy. So I did an illegal about turn, but I would be presumed innocent because I had a good reason for doing it. And I came back, and I had to chase him because now he was walking away. I asked him, I said, can I buy one of your pictures? And he told me, no, because he's sold out. I said, well, can you draw me one then? He said, okay, you'll have to give me a couple of hours. I'll call you when I'm done, but you can give me a deposit. So I gave him a deposit, and I didn't know if I'd ever see the picture, because he could have just walked away with it. Within a couple of hours, though, my phone rang, and it was a gruff sailor's voice on the other end of the phone that my picture was ready. I drove over to the A&W on 8th Street, where he was finishing it off, and he asked me if I wanted it autographed, and he did. And at that moment, I became the proud owner of a Sailor Dan original. Right there in the middle of the A&W parking lot, I made a transaction for one-of-a-kind work of art that was done in 2.5 hours and is autographed by Sailor Dan, a unique heritage of Saskatoon, the only genuine sailor that I know who lives in the middle of the prairies and dresses with a Navy ensign's shirt and a hat and sells his precious works of art. But why am I telling you this? What does that have to do with life being precious and living our dreams? Well, I think what it has to do with is that Dan doesn't listen to what other people say. He's a sailor in the middle of the prairies. And nobody has stolen his dream. Nobody. Confucius once said that if we find a job that we love, we'll never work a day in our life. And to quote Dan, Sailor Dan himself, he says that every day is a holiday. To conclude, I would ask the question, what is it that we could learn from Sailor Dan in living his dream so that we could realize that life and living our dreams is truly precious? Madam Chair.